So let me kind of give you a brief background about this CIPP first, what we do, and why we are so heavily invested in DPGs and DPI. These are two interchangeable words, often misused and very often misunderstood. Like, for instance, ENAM is not a DPG, neither it's a DPI. Interestingly, India has led this whole revolution of crafting the narrative of DPG and DPIs in the world. We have crafted this whole. So public goods in public policy is very well known. We know what a public good is. We know what a road is a public good. We know a hospital is a public good. But digital public good and its formation is something that India crafted. And when we look at the story of Aadhaar, the most important part of Aadhaar is that while it was housed inside the government, the development of technology did not happen inside the government. You see, and that is where a new nomenclature has to be defined. It was not a public and private partnership. It was a public and non-profit partnership. All DPGs, DPI that have been developed in this country have happened because of public and non-profit partnership. This is the departure that has taken place in India versus, say, Estonia or Norway, Sweden, or any other country in the world. So at CIPP, we decided that because of the fact that an infrastructure has developed, delivered, is performing, but there is very little research in this space into understanding its impact, into understanding it, and it has impact not just on the public, it also has impact on public policy. It also has impact on economic growth. So these are some of the areas that we are working on in terms of research. I won't dwell on that too much. There's a list of things that we are doing. The most important thing that I wanted to talk to you about today, and Dr. Charan Singh raised this issue about G20 and how do we popularize DPGs, or the fact that we have financial inclusion. The fact is that, in a certain section of the industry, at least, it is very well known that India is now the hub for all DPGs and DPIs. You'll be surprised to know that countries like Brazil and Spain have taken our UPI without a permission. And the fact of the matter is that we don't need to give them permission, because the way that these products are structured, they're structured as an open source software. And for some of you who are old enough to remember open source software, or to remember stalwarts like Richard Stallman, open source was a movement, when Microsoft was in its heydays, if you remember Linux, if you remember Linux stalwarts, these were ideators and thinkers who said that software needs to be open source and it needs to be free. So the fundamental of all our DPIs and DPGs resides in open source. It resides in this equality of availability of these products for everyone, not just for India, but for everyone in the world. So technically speaking, what I am showing you here, some of them are DPGs and some of them are DPIs. For instance, MOSIP is classified as a DPG. But what is MOSIP? MOSIP is basically a modular identity program. It's like it combines Aadhaar and it allows any other country to deploy Aadhaar. So there are countries in the world which have taken MOSIP, and they're deploying a very similar Aadhaar in their countries. And it's not that they've asked India permission. And the beauty of it is that they don't need to ask India's permission, because we have put it in the open source community. And that is what fundamentally changes this whole field. Now, you look at, you look at DAPA, for instance. World over, there is this challenge at how data should be used, what should be shared. We have been fighting, the government has been fighting battles in the Supreme Court about whether data should be private, what is private, what should be kept away from large platforms. What we've solved this problem to a large extent in the financial space by actually introducing a protocol which is DAPA. So every financial information that you have is actually fundamentally in your hands, unless until you decide to share it. So, and there are other elements like, ocean, Badal, Covin, of course, Nirupama pointed out. And the advantage of Covin again is not the fact that it, allowed you to deploy certification across a billion people in such a short time. The structure that Covin used was a protocol, which was backend protocol. Backend protocol is the same protocol that is being used for Aadhaar. Backend protocol is the same protocol which is used for MOSIP. And protocols are very important in software. And protocols are also very important in public policy. Why? Till now, when we used to write public policy, we used to write, how do we write public policy? We have a discussion. We have a couple of bureaucrats in a room deciding, what the public policy should be. We have some stakeholders coming in. Now we have people like Nirupama kind of adding to the thought process there. And then, there's a document crafted. That document is crafted, it passes. If it has to be turned into law, it goes to a legislative exercise, and then it becomes a policy. Now, in this world, you don't need to do all that. And you don't need to craft public policy in stone. You don't need to pass it always through the legislative process. You don't need to do it through notification. So interestingly, we have UPI, and the payment vision came 3 years later. There was no notification by RBI saying that banks need to adopt or accept or involve UPI. So this is the other part. Public, non-profit, and private sector adoption, not by law or not by danda or not by penalty, but adoption by efficiencies. So what happens? Why people adopted Aadhaar? Because it was efficient. Estonia still suffers from efficiency. Their systems go down. The bachelor is not here, but there's a very different mindset and framework that we have adopted to the rest of the world. And that framework is very important to understand. And once we understand that framework, we will address some of these problems that we see of inclusion, which are still pending. So when you have developed a system in non-profit, you give it to the government to run it. So it develops in non-profit, it is given to NPCI. NPCI houses that particular entity again in a non-profit, not in for-profit, not in a government department. Okay, it's not a government department, which is very different for running, like roads are still run by Ministry of Roads and Surface Transport, or it is still maintained by PWD, which is a government department. But these DPGs, DPIs are consciously like ONDC, for instance. ONDC is the counterpart of Amazon and Flipkart. But it is not a competition. Actually, the objective there is that the efficiency of ONDC will make it possible for Amazon, Flipkart to integrate with ONDC. Similarly, when UPI was launched, actually Paytm said that we don't want to partner with them because they saw it as a threat, because it was taking over transaction. But why did every bank and every wallet is integrated with UPI? You know why? Because all of you used it. All of you demanded it. All of you said that my bank account has to be linked to my wallet. I don't want to put money into my wallet and keep it there. I want to keep money in my account. So suddenly they realized that the only efficiency which used to come from all the banks integrating with one single element was a digital public good. And that is the success of DPGs, which is happening in each area in that way. It is being thought through in that manner, and it is being implemented in that manner. The reason the past failures of, say, public platforms have not worked because of private sector or consumers not seeing any gains from it. These are platforms where public, consumers see gain. So that's the kind of brief background I wanted to give for at least the students in the room to understand the structure of these two elements. DPGs and DPIs definitions are still evolving. There's no clarity on what is the difference and distinction between them. Sometimes some people call DPGs, like, what will you call UPI? Would you call it a DPG or a DPI? There's still, the jury is still out on that. Even between the DPG alliance and in the community, we are still trying to evolve a distinction. Now, I wanted to add another element. I want to spend a minute on this. You see, there has been debate that should these DPGs be free or should you charge for them? Okay. There was a year back, there was a lot of debate that UPI should be chargeable. Okay. Now, this goes fundamentally against the basic principle of open source. So Richard Stallman, who's, RMS, as he's called in the hacker circles, who kind of crafted this mental framework of open source versus free, he said there is a liberty which comes from a product being free in the digital world. And that liberty is the liberty which actually grants inclusion, because of the capacity that it can be used by everyone and anyone, anywhere in the world. So moment you even put a 0.005 charge on UPI, you take away that liberty of freedom. Hence, we have argued very strongly against the fact that DPG should not be dropped. The other part of it, which should be understood very well, is that these are non-proprietary platforms. The government doesn't own them. You must understand this fundamentally. The government still owns the highways and the roads, okay? But technically, these platforms are not owned by the government. These platforms actually exist on GitHub. GitHub is like a drive, Google Drive, okay? All the code, all the code of these softwares exists there. Then you can tomorrow, Rajesh ji can decide that he wants to launch a UPI in Bangladesh. He can just download the code and give it to the Bangladesh government. UAE government came to us and said that we want India's help in launching the UPI. So we gave them that help. And so we are hand-holding them into the integration. But they could have done it on their own. So that's very important to understand that these are non-proprietary platforms. The other is the fact that, why are they going global so fast? There are 73 odd countries which are implementing some part of UPI, some part of MOSEF, some part of Beacon protocol, some part of, even our ocean thing. There is talk about, ONDC is going into Norway and Sweden in terms of its basic architecture. The fact is that, as software, these are modular. What does modular means? Model means that the building blocks. We used to play games as kids, Lego. You have this Lego box. So each block is independent. Each block can be taken out anytime. Each block is, can be added. You can add multiple blocks. So each block in software, and, Vinit would tell us about the fact that, what modular architecture basically frees up the software programmers. Because if you have one single architecture and one single program, your dependency on the vendor rises. So whether it is IBM or Microsoft or Accenture or any of the world, our dependency on them rises. They continues to charge us money for maintaining, for managing that software. It's not happening in space because it's modular. So customization is easy. You can combine your other Aadhaar with, tomorrow Estonia can take Aadhaar and replace its own system, and it's modular. They can add it. All the integrations are open. All the roads between Aadhaar and any other software that anybody in the proprietary Microsoft of the world and government world has developed can be integrated with it. So it automatically has a huge potential to go global by its nature. So that's the, so you can run whatever you want on this. The other thing is, this is the crucial part, in that sense. And this is also the legislative part where we've worried and worked for so long. And unfortunately, for some reason, there is this gap between the policy makers and the technology world. And the challenge is that we can actually address data privacy through technology. We don't necessarily need to craft a complicated law that we need to change and adapt. Because what does a software protocol does? You can make changes as you see challenges and opportunities of making things. You can't do that in the law. You see, once you made a law, how comprehensive law can you make for an emerging tech space? How much can you envision? You cannot. What will be the outside user cases you can envision? Not many. I mean, even the combined knowledge of all the think tanks in the world has not been able to put that together because it's humanly impossible. So it's better to do some part in actually a different way. Address technological problem through technology. And that's where I think the data privacy and data security thing is already existing in the DPGs. It allows the world over to adopt it. And if the global world adopts it, it becomes easier for us to regulate globally. For instance, the crypto conundrum. No? The G20 is kind of debating that. Kya karna hai crypto ka? Legislation leke aani hai. Because the old framework of mind is always ki legislation leke aana. Ye global legislation leke aani hai crypto. Why? Not needed. You add a layer on top of UPI. You ensure that everything goes through UPI. And all crypto-based transaction goes through the banks. Automatically KYC happens. KYC is actually embedded in MOSIP. You embed that. All crypto transaction has to go through Aadhaar. Problem solved. You identify both ends of the party. So our thinking is that some of these solutions already exist in the tech world. The DPG is a huge beneficiary of an Indian way of thinking. This is not thinking that we have taken from anywhere else. We have evolved this thinking because of the fact that we were a populous country. We cannot build large systems and software systems, which can manage a population scale interactions. Getting 1.3 billion people to interact through WhatsApp to download the certificate, no company can deliver. Ask IBM, it will take 15 years to build that. Ask Infosys, it will take 25 years to build that. NHS in US, in UK, failed successively. HIPAA deployment has been a successful failure for the last 17 years. Our healthcare management system of patient interface is happening via COVID. We've already deployed it. It's already in the pipeline. No Infosys, IBM has been involved in, and that's the beauty. So that's why we believe that this thinking, this mindset of development, these software can be taken globally. I'll stop there.